Good morning, everybody. My name is Larry Jacobs. It's January 26th, 2023. Thank you for listening to Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio today. We got a good show for you this time with TJ Heck, Dr. Heck, and Jim Mirabelli, both from Centerpoint Education. We're going to talk about science. We're going to talk about science assessments. We're going to talk about science interim assessments, what that means, how to align them with the curriculum and use them instructionally. Okay, so it's going to be a pretty good show. All right, I'm looking forward to this with my friends from Centerpoint Education. All right, so TJ and Jim, hang on for a second. Let me just do a little bit of homework here. I'm Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio. We're going to archive the show over at ace-ed.org like we always do, ace-ed.org. That's the home website of our American Consortium for Equity in Education. And we have a lot of stuff over there. Our magazine, which is an online journal called Equity and Access. And if you'd like to subscribe, you can see the subscription link over there. It's free. We'll send you the link every time we send it out. We're the only folks focusing exclusively on equity and access in pre-K-12. If you're interested in that, we know a lot of people are. Please, we'd love to send you the magazine link each time. Again, it's free. All right, and you can click on the magazine anytime over at ace-ed.org and just click on the cover, read through the magazine, see if you like it, et cetera, et cetera. And you know what? I think you will like it. Okay, we archive our podcasts over there. You'll see the link as well as the links for SEL Today and our new website, which we're really constantly developing, and we're going to be working on it hard the next month or two, and that's all about teacher retention, okay, which we think is a real challenge out there. I think you know that too. And, we're trying to do everything we can in that regard because it really boils down, like everything else does, to a question of equity, and that's us over at ace-ed.org. So go over there and check it out. And everything we do over there is free, by the way. And also now let me bring on my two guests, ladies first. Hi, TJ. Good morning. It's Larry here.
Good morning. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm fine. By the way, I don't know if you want me to give it, but I love your Twitter handle.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yes, Dr. Heck. Dr. Heck. I'll let other people figure that one out. Okay?
Right.
Yeah, it's great. TJ Heck, okay, who's Director of Science Assessments over at Centerpoint Education. And by the way, TJ led the development and implementation for Michigan's Next Generation Science Standards, okay, the NCSS-aligned state summative science assessments. Is that a good way to put it, TJ?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, I worked on the state science assessments for Michigan.
Well, are you a Michigander?
I am. Go Green.
Obviously, a Michigan State. I won't get into that.
Yes.
Yep. Had I said go, had you said go blue, I would have thought differently. Okay, but I won't get into that. I won't get into that rivalry. Thank you. Okay, you're no problem. Jim, are you there?
I am, Larry. Thanks for having us.
No, you're kidding. My pleasure. Where you live? Where are you staying at, Jim? Where are you these days? It looks like you might be in Indiana, but I'm not sure.
I was for over 20 years. Went to school there as well and lived there for over 20 years. But I'm in Illinois now, kind of back home actually, where I grew up.
Where are you? I used to live in Chicago. Where are you?
Nice. Yeah, I'm just outside. I'm in Park Ridge, and you cross the street and you're in Edison Park, basically.
I know it well. I absolutely know that. Well, Jim and TJ, welcome to today's show. This is going to be interesting. I like doing science shows here, and this is really good stuff. I'm going to touch on the equity part too. I guess I'll ask Jim. Jim, just tell us all about. I can read it off the website, but if you want to, just tell us all about Centerpoint Education and what you guys do over at centerpointeducation.org. Yeah. If you're in the mood. You're welcome.
Of course. Thanks so much for asking that. Well,
right.
We do a lot of things, right? Probably our sweet spot, or where we spend the most time, is in designing and developing assessments. And so we work with districts and we've worked with states. We were, formerly we were Park Incorporated, and so we were, managing the Park Consortium, the assessments there. So our world is focused on creating high quality assessment products, but also we do curriculum as well, and we get into professional learning.
Cool. Very good. Anything to add to that, TJ?
Nope. That sounds about like Centerpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. I got to tell you. Okay, and by the way, hello to Laura who's listening or will listen at some point. I know that. And they work with school districts and all that. So please, it's centerpointeducation.org. Everybody, I always like to tell everybody because they'll be interested as we go through the show. I said the show is about science assessments, and then about science interim assessments. Okay? And I don't know, let's do, you can swing with the Jim. Well, tell me what we mean by a interim assessment. Please, TJ.
Yeah, absolutely. So interim assessments are also sometimes known as benchmark assessments. These are generally scheduled at like regular intervals throughout the year in school districts. They can be anywhere from 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, depending on how the district chooses to use them. They tend to be a semi-cumulative assessment, so they can cover larger chunks of content that the students may have learned across the year. And then they can serve several purposes. They can serve purposes to determine whether or not students have retained information and apply that information or transfer that information to new and unique contexts. They can serve the purpose to predict how students might perform on state tests. And then they can also help to track how students' knowledge is growing in sophistication over the course of a school year. So they can serve lots of different purposes.
And how does somebody decide what the purpose of the test is? Okay, and I'm asking like a classroom teacher, what's the difference between this and me as a science teacher, okay, just giving a test and giving the kids a grade as I see it? And by the way, I know the answer, but I just want to ask the question. Okay, go ahead.
That's a wonderful question.
Believe me, I know there's a difference, but I just want everybody to understand that. Okay, please, go ahead.
Yeah, it actually all comes down to how the test was designed. So any assessment that's designed or provided for students, there is an intent behind that assessment. And so an interim assessment is specifically designed to do one or more of the things that I've mentioned, whereas a classroom assessment is specifically designed for other purposes. For example, to give formative feedback to teachers in the moment about how students are taking up the various pieces of information they're teaching.
Okay, so let me go over to Jim now. And that's great, TJ. Thank you. Okay, so Jim, you're the director of assessment design. All right, and let's say you're working with the ABC school district. Okay, how does the ABC school district tell you, and how do you make that happen? How's the magic happen in the back of the Chinese restaurant? I know you.
It's conversations, right? It's talking about what do they want to get from from these interim assessments or whatever assessments it is. So it's having those conversations, and then like TJ said, then it's designing the assessment to do what we want to show. And so we typically, our assessments, we use evidence-centered design, and that's a set of principles that, really allows us to, it helps ensure that our assessments are valid. That's one of the set of principles that we use when creating our assessments. But, one other piece that I think I would maybe throw in there is that often interim assessments can also give us data that could lead to informing curriculum sorts of tweaks, right? It might shed light on maybe there's a gap in the curriculum. And so whether that be for the current year or for future years ahead, that's something that we encourage, is looking at those kinds of trends. One other thing that maybe I'll mention here too is that when we talk about getting data right from these interim assessments, often I think folks want to look for those gaps, like I was mentioning, right? Like where are students struggling? Where is our curriculum instruction lacking? But I think it's also important to look for the positive trends because, well, one, I don't think we do that enough, right? And I think it's good to celebrate that.
Thank you. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, the really cool thing that. I'll conclude with just saying that the
No,
cool
no,
thing
you're doing
is
great. You're doing great. I was just agreeing with you that we tend to look for the negative, not the positive, and the positive is far makes us all far happier, doesn't it? I just struck me when you said that. I thought it was very insightful.
Yeah, absolutely, Larry. And what's really cool is when you can share that out then with other teachers or other districts, right? Then hopefully you can see that kind of success replicated in other schools or classrooms or even in other content areas.
But Jim, since you designed the test, okay, let me ask, how do you measure? Not every classroom is the same, okay? Even let's just say a ninth grade science class, okay? Not every classroom is the same. Some of the kids do better in science than others, and they were assigned that way, okay? However, they're doing it. How do you create the test that a school district can use? And maybe you have to do it school by school, class by class. I don't know. Okay, how do you somehow equalize it all when science class A is different from science class B, even though they're in the same class, same grade, in the same district?
That's a really good question, Larry. And I'll kind of let me give maybe a little response, sort of in general.
Yeah.
When we think of designing our assessments at Centerpoint, and then I'll let TJ maybe talk to. She'll fill in all the holes that I create when it comes to science stuff. TJ is our science guru. As I mentioned, right, when we design and develop our assessments, we use principles of evidence-centered design. We also use universal design. And so those two, right, sets of principles or designs are really meant to help ensure that the assessments are valid and fair. And so valid meaning, right, like that it's aligned to the standards, which means it's aligned to what kids are learning or should be learning in the classroom, that, you know, the questions are grade level appropriate, that there's this balance of rigor, that there are strong quality checks. It's actually a really important piece, is ensuring that there are quality checks along the way to make sure that, you know, the assessments are tight and valid and accurate. And then on the universal design side of things, it's more about, you know, the fairness of the assessment, and is it free of sensitivity? Is it accessible to students? Right. One other thing, if you give me just a moment on that, I want to make sure to mention is that we also use principles. Thank you. So we also use principles of culturally responsive education when designing and developing the assessments. And you know, I'm not going to say we are new to it, but we are certainly learning. I think, like most people still are learning in that field. But we've been working on this for maybe three years now, 3+ years. At any rate, what I really love about it is something I think that's familiar to most people is the mirrors and windows analogy. And so what I mean by that is, when, you know, we aim to create assessments that reflect the diverse cultures of students, so that they see themselves in the assessment, even if it's in this small way, right? When we're talking about an assessment question, even if it's in a small way, that still allows them to have that mirror aspect, I would say. And you know, I think that validates them and celebrates their background. And then that windows aspect is, you know, allowing the students to see through the window and into different cultures. And, you know, the hope there, right, is that they're building some connections, maybe piquing an interest in something they're not familiar with, and maybe at a minimum, right, just kind of gaining an understanding about or awareness about other human beings. All of this, you know, those designs that I mentioned, universal design, evidence-centered design, and culturally responsive education, those are all there, and we apply those. Really, the big goal, right, it's to benefit all students in their assessment experience and educational experience.
And, you know, Jim, it's funny, we'll go over to TJ in a second, but it used to be a test was a test, and and you would create a test and it just measured, okay, the curriculum, so to speak. Okay, but taking culturally relevant questioning into consideration, creating a test, an assessment, if I may, is a lot harder than it used to be. Okay, because all of a sudden our eyes were opened. All right, not all of a sudden, we kind of knew it, but all of a sudden we're trying to do this, like you said, 3 years or so. We're trying to make it so that all kids have a chance to do the same thing. It's just an interesting thing in the world of assessments, and I think it's a really important, and you said at the beginning, we're still learning how to do it. We are. Nobody's a genius in it, but you guys are probably better at it as professional assessment people, okay, creation of assessments, okay, than a typical teacher, okay, and that's why this is important to get the measuring exactly correct, right, TJ? Talk to me, TJ, about all this equity stuff in there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really like all the points that Jim brought up, and
great.
I think what's really interesting about science specifically as a content area is we have this amazing opportunity with the onset of the next generation science standards and the performance expectations that are set in as many states' standards, or they have standards like the NGSS. And what's so neat about it is it requires that students figure out phenomena and solve engineering problems. And what that does for equity is it allows teachers and assessment designers to set the context of the science in a space that's relatable and relevant to students. And so when we have the opportunity to choose these phenomena, to choose these engineering design problems that students are going to wrestle with and figure out using their science content knowledge, we have this amazing opportunity to level the playing field for students to engage with the science, because now it's not just a memorization of a science word or concept. It's actually applying that to their life, to their community, to their space in their home. And so science gives us that really great opportunity, and those of us who are building assessments have grabbed onto that and are working across shareholders who are representative of student populations. We're even pulling students in to help us vet various phenomena and engineering design problems to see if they're relevant to them, if kids are interested in it.
Yeah, it's so cool. And, I wrote this down as you were writing. And answer me this. Do we want to measure, and I know you guys are science, but then you can use any subject you want. Do we want to measure science learning? Okay, do we want to measure social studies learning? Do we want to measure math learning? Or do we want to measure their ability to think it through? Because the reason I say that, okay, there's a difference between the two things. I was never very good at math, okay? But I honestly believe that it was, and you brought this up, it was taught to me out of context. Okay,
right.
I did not understand. Okay, and it took me a long time to understand it. That math is logic, and if you understand, if you can think something through, the math becomes clearer. But the teachers weren't teaching it that way. Back when I was in school, we all wore togas, okay, and sandals, and we were fighting the barbarians. It's a long time ago. All right, but it wasn't taught the same way. All right, and it has to be in context. And had they told me that this is the way you think something through, as opposed to whatever the hell they were trying to teach me, okay, it would have made all the difference in the world. And as you design a test and an assessment, I'll ask this, TJ, are we measuring the subject matter, or do you want to measure the thinking ability, which really does level the playing field? I got to tell you.
Yeah. In science, and this is a concept that's rather new in the science field, since the inception of the Next Generation Science Standards, we are trying to measure sense-making, the ability for students to make sense of particular phenomenon and figure out what's going on. And in order to do that, students have to bring together their content knowledge, so the principles of science, those core ideas. They have to bring together the ways that we figure things out, which we call the practices. So am I going to, figure out an investigation, and do I need to write an explanation about this? How would I go about figuring this out? And then we also have these cross-cutting concepts, which are really cool principles that cut across all sorts of different science content, from ideas around like picking up on patterns, deciding what cause and effect is playing a role in the particular phenomenon. And so when students have those tools and we're using those together to make sense of these phenomenon, that's what we are assessing in students. And that's why building out these new science assessments, whether they're interim or state or classroom level, it's definitely a different lift than what the assessment community is used to.
And, I'm going to ask you a funny question. I'll start it this way. When we had to develop, scientists had to develop a COVID vaccine, okay, nobody said to them, we need to develop a COVID vaccine. Everybody clear your desk, okay?
Right.
Now, we told them to use all the information that they knew of to create, again, a good example, a COVID vaccine. All right. So when we're measuring kids, when you think about this, and Jim, you think about this too, when we are trying to measure kids' ability, okay, and here's the phrase from when I was a kid, are these tests, do you design them as being closed book or open book, which is a funny way to say that? Go ahead. I'll just ask that question. I'll ask TJ that one.
Yeah.
How's it work?
No, I think that's a great question.
A dumb question?
And
that's not a dumb question.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Pruitt, one of the founders of NGSS, essentially said, if it's Googleable, it shouldn't be on my assessment.
Thank you.
So we want these to be, as you would call them, open book assessments. We want kids to be able to look at these phenomenon and pull from their knowledge, both in school and out of school knowledge that they've learned. You might have students who are really interested and active in their local museums or in their local engineering clubs or in their local farm community. We want that knowledge brought into the assessment so that they can relate their lives to the thing that they're trying to figure out on their science test.
And I'm so glad you said farming, because farming these days is science. Period. End of discussion.
Absolutely.
On that one. Absolutely it is agricultural science. It's just amazing. Jim, is there a word these days for, I used it, an open book test? What do you call your assessment? What do you do, Jim? Is it still open book? How's it work?
Well, so I think there are pieces, right, that, and I agree with what TJ was saying about, the Googleable thing, right? If you can search it, then, maybe it's not worth being on the assessment. I think there's some truth to that. When I guess liken it to like a math, right, our math assessments, I would say things like memorizing formulas is no longer really, that's not something that we expect kids to do, right? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense in having them memorize a whole list of formulas. And, same would be true like with a calculator, right? Like
where were you when I was in school? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things we want the student to have a calculator, right? Like we do want students to be proficient in things like, fluency kind of standards, basic arithmetic and stuff. But certainly, right, you don't want calculations, like having students do calculations, to get in the way of them, showing their reasoning, right? Like of being able to reason through a problem or model with a problem, right? Because those are the things I really liked when TJ was talking about the sense making, and Larry, you were talking about this, of how you learned math, right? Well, I think we're still moving, right? We've been working at trying to move away from the way that you and I learned math growing up, and more to math in context, and not just math, but just learning in context, and things like sense making and critical thinking, because that really helps the person, right, overall in life.
Absolutely, and by the way, it also helps the economy, I might add, and everything else they're going to do in life. It's
for sure.
We're teaching them common sense. I mean, and we got the assessments have to reflect that. Okay, so on that note, okay, and maybe I don't know if you guys know this, okay, but when teachers are taught how to do a test when they're in education school, okay, it has the way they're being taught to assess kids really changed? You see a difference between the classical classroom tests and ones that, well, Centerpoint would make up for a district? Okay, how are we doing? And I'll ask TJ. TJ, what's your thought?
Yeah, I would say, this is an area that I've worked with my local universities and some others. When it comes to teacher preparation
would that be Michigan State, TJ? Would that be Michigan State?
Yeah, Michigan State too.
Do I know? Right, thank you. You're welcome.
These have, we have got some amazing teacher preparation programs throughout the U.S., and they're doing such a phenomenal job of preparing our teachers. But I will say, because of the time allotted for these programs and all of the things that this pre-service teachers need to know, assessment isn't often a focus of that. If they're lucky, teachers will maybe take 1 or 2 assessment classes throughout their entire preparation program. And what is more common now is that teacher preparation providers are teaching teachers how to critically review assessments that are put out by providers like us. And so that they're able to look at those assessments, determine whether or not they are doing and assessing their students the way they want them to, and then making adjustments or making choices based on those criteria. So I think that assessment has changed. I'm not sure that teacher preparation providers have the opportunity to really get into that deeply when it comes to preparing our teachers.
Yeah, and we have to really think about that a lot. Jim, I have a question for you. You're the director over at Centerpoint of Assessment, Design, and Development. And today we're talking about science, but we could just as easily be talking about math or social studies or English language arts, and you'd still be on the program, okay? Because I arranged this through Laura, et cetera, and Sonia. So my question is, okay, how do you learn to do this across the board, Jim? Is it hard?
That's a great question.
Let me ask it another way, Jim. Can anybody do this? You know what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yes. The way you do it is you get really smart people to be working with you. And that's what we have at Centerpoint. We have awesome, TJ is so awesome in the science realm, right? My background.
State grad. What else could she be but awesome? Yeah, good. Sorry, blue people. Good. Yeah.
So no, honestly, it's right. It's the fact that we have really smart people in all of those areas, right? With English and language arts, with mathematics, with science. So we have really good people that work at Centerpoint, and we work collaboratively, put out good products.
Yeah, you do. You do indeed. And thank you, Jim. And my other question, I'll ask CJ, that's my wife's nickname, TJ, okay? TJ, okay? It is CJ, all right? I'm sorry, I'm used to that, okay? I wrote this down before, and it's interesting. When you design an assessment and when you talk to a school district, et cetera, do they use the assessment to measure the past, or do they want to use it more to know what they need to do going forward? Okay, how's the test balanced in that regard? Are we measuring what they know, or are we measuring how we move forward on this?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that a lot of that depends on, for what purpose the school wants to use it. But oftentimes, schools look to a single assessment to do many things. And so a school will often say, well, we want to see what the students know, and we want to see what we need to do next. And so this is where that instructionally relevant piece of the interim assessment design and other assessment designs come in. We want to ensure that not only is the assessment able to say, okay, students are able to do, this particular set of things, or able to make sense of these particular types of phenomenon, given, a specific set of scaffolds that they're using. But we also want teachers to be able to look at that data, find patterns in that data, and say, all right, well, our students are doing really well in these areas. These are where their assets are. We want to focus on their assets and then use those assets to help us move forward instruction in equitable ways. So we want to say, For example, if our students are doing really well in modeling and they can model these, complex scientific phenomenon, then we want to leverage their skills in modeling to help us inform how we might move that into perhaps, more scientific explanations and being able to craft those scientific explanations about other types of phenomenon. So it's really about seeing the patterns in the data, understanding what assets our students have, and leveraging those assets to move forward in our instruction.
It's a lot more detailed. This is why I think it's so important to talk to Centerpoint, okay, you guys and other companies like yours, because too often we take assessments as what we're doing in the classroom, and it has to measure more than what we're doing, okay? And most teachers, I say we're not that well, we're trained in it, but we're not deeply trained in it, okay? And a lot of it we learn from experience, et cetera, but that's why we need others to help us along. And what Jim was saying with the culturally relevant, it's so important these days. All right, and you guys are just doing a great job, so I thank you very much. Okay, you're both terrific. Thank you, TJ. Go Spartans.
Thank you. Go green, go white.
There you go. Okay, and Jim, I don't mean to, where did you go to college, Jim? Assuming you did, obviously.
Indiana
Jim?
University.
Where?
Indiana University. Can you hear me?
I've never heard of it. Yeah, I heard of it. Geez, never heard of that. Big Red.
Come on, the Hoosiers.
Just kidding. Okay, good enough. Rivals here. I don't know why they get along so well, TJ and Jim. All right, unbelievable. All right, guys. Thank you so much, both of you. This is a lot of fun. This is great. I learned a lot, and so did the audience. So thank you, TJ, and thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Be good, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye. Okay, TJ Heck, Dr. Heck. Okay, and Jim Mirabelli, both from Centerpoint Education at centerpointeducation.org. And this is cool stuff. And they do professional learning, they do assessments, they do curriculum work. It's a good company. Okay, so please check it out. You'll good website here too. All right, they really are. They've been on the show a number of times. You're going to archive the show over at ace-ed.org, ace-ed.org. Everything we do is over there, and everything we do is free for you, America's educators. I'm Larry Jacobs. Thanks for listening.